This episode is brought to you by Portland Distro. If you like underground music, movies, and more, go to portlanddistro.com for licensed merch, vinyl, CDs, and more. Plug in the discount code 10OFF, TENOFF, for a 10% discount at portlanddistro.com. Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Everything Went Black podcast. Welcome Brian Strawn to the show. Our friendship has spanned 3 decades. We played music together, toured the country, toured Europe back in the early 90s, and we have been reunited in the Begotten Suns project. So Brian and I reminisce about the old days. We talk about how easy it was to make these 4 songs, and what the future holds. So after you listen to this show, I urge you all to check out the other shows of the podcasting Illuminati, the Horsemen of the Podcasting Apocalypse. Starting the week off, we have Brandon Legion bringing you Horror Wolf 666. Tuesday, the finest metal podcast on the internet, Into the Necrosphere with Jackie Smith. Wednesday, Everything Went Black. I return on Thursday with Jeff Kashid and Mike Scandato for Necromaniacs. Over the weekend, on Sunday, Carl Hikara brings you Soul Knox, and Out in the Shadows, Iblis Manifestations, brought to you by Cheyenne of Trivax. And he has his own agenda, his own schedule. You just have to pay attention to when new episodes arise. If you want to support the show, I urge you all to check out the Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you can contribute to the future of the show. You get access to bonus content. For $5 a month, you get the bonus content plus early access to regular stream episodes. And for $25 a month, you can become a sponsor. Onward to the show. But what some people probably don't know or listen to this is that you and I were in a band like 30 years ago at this point, right?
Well, it was 1994 to 96. A lot of people don't know that Otis was a very brief experience for everybody, you know?
It's funny that back then it seems like 2 years. Didn't it seem like the band existed for like 10 years or something like that?
Well, we did a lot, there was a lot of kind of gearing up to it. So it was probably closer to 3 years, because we weren't like a lot of people where it's like, hey, let's be a band and then play a show next week. You know, we spent a lot of time getting it together, you know?
Yeah. But, is that stuff, can you find any of that material anywhere? Like, I've never really looked online or like to see if it's in Spotify. Has anyone, is that stuff available anywhere?
It's on YouTube. So I can send you my YouTube page link and you can share it as part of this if you'd like to. But most of the records and live on the radio performances are available on YouTube.
Yeah,
actually, it took a while to get there, you know.
Over the pandemic, I ended, obviously everyone had a lot of time on their hands, and I bought a DAT machine because I used to have like some portable one that, pretty much stopped working, years ago. So I invested in this like Tascam, like studio DAT player, and I had like tons of DATs, and a lot of all those live sessions, I archived all that stuff too. So I have like,
nice.
Yeah, WAV files and MP3 files of all those sessions, just so, the DAT tape it degrades just like any other audio format, so now I have it all digitized.
Yeah, I mean, there was Otis goes back. We had a single at one point, you know what I mean?
Yeah, no,
So
totally.
we were having stuff released on cassette at one point. So yeah, it's interesting to see how things evolved.
Yeah, it's some of those the radio shows are probably some of my favorite recordings actually, because I feel like that really captured what the band sounded like live as opposed to the records. The records, I gotta be honest, even at the time, I was never really happy with any of the recordings we made. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, you kind of deal with what you have access to, and none of us had any money or, you know, the wherewithal to put it together. I mean, that first record was like $700 it cost to make, something like that.
Yeah, it's insane at the Lanes in
Yeah.
Alston, which
Yeah.
long ago that place disappeared like long ago, I imagine.
Well, just like everything. But
Yeah.
yeah, no, I mean, we had I don't know if you remember, but you had an ad in the Phoenix for, drummer wanted when you came back from Bellingham with those couple of guys. I can't remember their names,
Oh yeah.
but
Yeah, totally. That's right.
we did a bit of jamming there. We tried to put that together. Then those guys took off, and then you called me up and said, "Hey, Al B from SSD is looking to put something
Oh
together.
man.
Do
Yeah.
you want to go out and jam with him?" And we had a nice day with him, and his wife was there, and they were super nice. But so you'd reach out periodically, and then it would be like, "Hey, I found this singer." And then Josh showed up one day to a practice, and I'm like, "How long have you been playing bass?" And he's like, "I don't play bass, but
That was the
over."
best part about like we were auditioning all these bass players, and I know at one some dude showed up from some band and like no one was right. And then I remember Josh just like hanging out with because him and Kevin were living together. You know, they were living in a house together, and he just is there to hang out. And he's like, I don't play anything, you know.
But I'm like, oh, that's a shame because it's a good fit. And then I went back and I was playing in the band Mother for a while because I was living with those guys, or maybe I was just moving in with them. And then you were persistent. You kept hitting me up like, "Hey, do you know anybody?" And then we started doing it. So all's well that ends well, I guess.
Yeah, we had a bunch of different guys that we tried to audition as well. We were playing with someone for a while, and that's a whole other story. Nice guy, but some darkness crept into his interactions with us, and I'll leave it at that. And we had to stop playing with him. But
Yeah. Well, that's the hardest part, right? So I took a long hiatus from doing music, and when I finally decided to do music again, I was like, yeah, I'm just gonna do my own project where I play everything. And that's the Roman Letters EP that just came out in June.
yeah,
But the drive to put together a group of people and maintain it over the weeks. It's not that I'm too old for it, but in a lot of ways, I just don't have the patience or energy for it. So I
well,
think I think I mentioned to you like, "Hey, I'm doing this thing," and then that's when you were like, "Hey, I'm looking to do something similar where I'm playing most of the instruments, etc."
yeah, and and one of the things I always admired about you and was the fact that you actually were proficient on all these other instruments, like the Roman numerals thing. Like you did everything on that except for some
Roman letters.
Roman letters.
That's all
Yeah.
right. There's a Roman numerals. I think the guys from Season to Risk have
Oh, okay.
a side project named Roman numerals. But in any event, I'm not really proficient, but I think every drummer that plays a little guitar kind of wonders like, can I do it? And if I could, how would it come together in the studio? And you start mapping out how you're going to do all the parts and stuff. I didn't really have a master plan, unfortunately.
It's funny being a drummer because that is the most. I mean, not maybe you don't see it this way, but I see it this way because I can't play drums. I don't have the coordination for it. But that really is like the hardest instrument in all of the pieces that combine to form a band. You know what I mean? Becoming decent at drums is, to me, seems like such like an impossible feat, because I actually tried playing drums like a long time ago and I just sucked at it so bad. And guitar, bass, synths, like anything like that, singing even, is like I feel like it takes a fraction of the intention to get good at that as it does to drumming, especially like, you can play multiple styles too, you know what I mean? And it's hard, but that's a one up though. It's like if you want to do your own project and you play drums, the other stuff kind of falls into place, and it's definitely less challenging, I think, to put something cohesive together if you play drums to start.
Oh yeah. I mean, if I didn't have the help of the engineers and technology, it certainly wouldn't have sounded as good, and if I didn't start playing drums young, I probably wouldn't have had the energy to do it, but I grew up with a lot of instruments around the house. I think my stepfather was a musician, my mom was a
Yeah.
singer, so I had like a full PA and a full band set up in my basement in high school era. So that was a real benefit.
There's a cat here, so
Oh,
that's what
that's
that
all right.
sounded. Yeah.
That's all right.
Yeah.
But the thing with you, it was really organic. I kind of, when I was filming you guys in Providence, at the Tomb Show, you mentioned this thing, and I was like, yeah, I would love to do that. And then, it was just easy. And I think that's kind of the route, that path, the path of least resistance, those projects come together, more easily. So, hey, do you want to do it? Yeah, sure. Send me some of the demos, and let's just pick a day.
Yeah, it came
But
together pretty quickly too. And actually it was kind of a trip just seeing you actually at Providence, because that was literally the first show. Well, that's not true, actually. We played one show at the very end of when the quote unquote end of the pandemic, when I still had just recovered from COVID. We played one show, but that Providence show was like the first tour date that we'd done since before the pandemic. So it'd been like 3 years or something like that, or 2.5 years since we'd actually been on the road. So the whole getting in a van, loading equipment, driving however many hours, loading into a club, it was such like a unusual feeling at the time. And because it's something that I was, hundreds of shows a year and then nothing, and then coming back and suddenly you're supposed to perform again in this kind of setting, in some other city that you don't live in,
yeah. And
hoping
then a
that people
random
show
guy
up.
that you knew since '93 shows up.
It was a total trip, man, but it was awesome. And I was so happy to see you, man, because we hadn't seen each other in a few years at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. I
But the
mean, we
last time
would
I
have.
saw you it was in Europe. It was in Switzerland, I think.
Yeah, what was that was when you had the trio version of the group, right?
Yeah, and that was quite a while ago too. Like, 'cause we've been a four piece since like 2015, I think, or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was good. I can't even remember what club you played, to be honest with you. But the beauty thing of living over there when I was in Switzerland was, you know, even the bigger bands, like I'm kind of friends with JD from Black Label Society, and they don't know anybody over there, so you'd actually have time to go out and have a meal and hang out on the side of the stage, and say a quick hello to Zach Wild and stuff like that. Whereas, in New York, New Jersey, Massachusetts, you'd never get that opportunity really.
Yeah, totally. It's like I was mentioning before, we're heading out to go check out Cannibal Corpse and Mayhem tonight. And I was texting with Eric Rutan about meeting up, and I haven't seen him in a few years too. So, but tonight's one of those nights. It's like a show's out in Brooklyn. It's like probably going to be a lot of people from their press operation, and it might be hard to catch up. You know what I mean? But I'm hoping to get a couple minutes to hang out and talk and just catch up with Eric too.
Yeah, absolutely. My brother was a huge fan of theirs, way back in, whenever they started, whatever it was, the late 80s or the early 90s. He was usually the guy that kind of turned me on to the more extreme stuff.
Right.
Um, but I always had my pop sensibilities, or kind of grew up on hair metal or whatever. That's just kind of the life in New Jersey, the Bon Jovi life.
Bon Jovi life.
I seriously, I had a buddy that would hang out outside of Bon Jovi's house, and he would, like, try and pick up chicks that were also hanging out at Bon Jovi's house, and just listen to cassettes of Bon Jovi. I mean, there wasn't much to do.
Little fun fact here about Bon Jovi is all right, now Garden State Parkway, okay, heading south.
Yeah,
There's
they've got a rest area,
yep, there used to be the cheese,
Sayreville.
right, it used to be the Cheesequake rest stop.
Yep.
Now it's the John Bon Jovi memorial, or not memorial, but the John Bon Jovi, rest area. Isn't that funny?
Yeah. No, I've been there since I think I've gone to the rest area. But yeah, I mean, we had our, hometown heroes, and of course Bruce was a big fixture in my life just because my stepfather played in his high school band, the Castiles, and he was always uber obsessed with Bruce, due to that connection. Um,
I'm
somewhere I
kind of
have
a I'm kind of a regular at the Bon Jovi rest area, actually, because
a
our practice space is like a few exits. It's in Keyport, so that's like just past that rest stop. And
yeah,
and
yeah.
I live in Jersey City right now, so it's a little bit of a hike for me to get to practice, but that's like a nice stop off point to get coffee or go to the bathroom or whatever, like on the way back and forth. So I'm a regular at the Bon Jovi rest area.
Otis was big on rest areas. Whenever we traveled, we seemed to stop way more often than was actually necessary,
Well,
for gas purposes,
it's funny, like this is really funny. I try to talk to like some of the like dudes in bands that are a little bit younger, that back in the 90s, the travel world was way different than it is now, as far as like being out on the road. Like the culture of the rest stops and just that road world is a way different than it is now. Now with social media and like mobile technology, you're not as cut off from things as you were back in the 90s when you and I were first going out on tour.
Oh
Like
yeah.
when we first started touring back then, you really were in a different world. Like you didn't even barely talk to anyone back home.
Oh yeah, I mean, we had a paper map, and there was not a lot of planning as far as, is this distance doable? Because you're not gonna, you're not plotting it out on Google Maps. So it's like we'd finish a gig and then drive 10 hours, or, whatever. And then, sometimes even cutting it close up until sound check or what have you.
Well,
But
that very first tour we did, that was like all the way out west to, because I mean, it was really kind of like done, booked by ourselves completely independently, and set up around like a show in Bellingham and Seattle because I knew people out there.
yeah, and Olympia also.
Yeah, in Olympia, right? Yeah, yeah, and it
Yeah.
was just like this completely. It was a total chaotic mess of poor planning and like barely having enough time to make some of these like not really, like you were saying, planning out the mileage of the time, or
Oh, it
you know
was the greatest time of our lives, though, at the same time.
yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I think the second week of that trip was like, Seattle area, you know, the beginning of the week, Chicago midweek, and then New Jersey Saturday. So it was like the whole country for 3 shows or something on the way back. But,
yeah,
it
it was
was
like
brilliant.
but it's like that's what you do back then. You don't, like, that's, you're just learning how to do all these things. And you there was that book Your Own Fucking Life like zine that came out, and
Oh, yeah.
pretty much just send cassettes to addresses and call people on the phone and hope you catch them or hope that you could leave a voicemail and have them get back to you. There was no way to even know that, like, it was like throwing a message in a bottle, like out into the ocean, and hoping for the best, really.
Yeah. No, it was good. I on the way out, I wrote this in my book. I put my shoes on a Monday and I didn't take them off until like a Friday or something. And we didn't plan for pillows or sleeping bags or anything like that. Like nobody brought anything sleeping related. So it was just like four dudes, like, laying on uneven equipment in a van with no blankets or anything.
Well,
But
the SVT, the speaker cabinet, was like the prime spot because that one actually was flat. You know what I mean?
yeah, it was pretty rough, but eventually, like, we built the loft and made got some sleeping bags and did a little planning. But I was good for, like, random people would be like, hey, if it comes down to it, you can stay with us. And I'd be like, well, it's come down to it, you know, like, like immediately. And a lot of people were like surprised and they're like, oh, I thought there was going to be some consultation with some other people. And it's like, no, you're the first to offer. It's going to happen now.
You really get to test people's hospitality, whether or not they actually get what they're saying to you back then.
Yeah. No, it was some people we turned down because it was too much and you could tell it was going to be too much of a party, or, it was going to be too gross of a house or whatever. And sometimes we went with it anyway. But I mean, that's what being young is all about. I couldn't do that now. I mean,
No,
back
hell
in
no,
those
dude.
days, like if I had like a closet to put my head in, like I'd lay down with my head in a closet and I'd be like, all right, I have some privacy.
Probably the most out of that whole first tour, the most notable show I think was the Grand Rapids, Michigan show. That I don't know if you remember that one at all.
Oh yeah, absolutely. The guy that was eating the grass and everything.
Yeah, dude, that was like one of the this is the first time I've ever been to some of these places. You know what I mean? Like I never thought about Grand Rapids. It was like we played there because someone got back to me about playing there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's like not like a goal of mine to play in Grand Rapids, Michigan. It was like, okay, someone got back to us and it's only like a 6-hour drive from like the previous city. And yeah, there was it was almost like someone had dropped a neutron bomb and killed everyone and left the building standing when we got there.
Oh
It
yeah.
just remember it being just desolate and empty. And then we ran into this like Charles Manson, like hippie guy with green teeth because he'd been eating a diet of wheatgrass.
Yeah, he only ate grass that he grew himself, and his whole shit was green.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of characters. I mean, there'd be like a random chick that had like a whole house to herself, but she only had stuff in the garage. I don't
Oh
know if
yeah.
you remember that. Like the
I do
entire
remember that.
house was empty and her bedroom was in the garage, and she's like, I just like to open the door in the morning. And I'm like, how do you argue with that? It does sound like a nice way to wake up, but it's just a bizarre way to live.
What's funny, we played with a band that night called Product. I don't know if you remember them.
Not really. Oh
I
yeah,
just
I
listened,
actually do. Yeah, I do remember them.
I just listened to their demo like last week, man. Like I found it in a cassette pile and I was like, oh yeah, I remember these guys. That's why I think the Grand Rapids, Michigan night was like so much in the forefront of my head right now.
Yeah, there were a lot of good bands, a lot of forgettable ones. We
Yeah.
used to
Yeah.
go out to Rochester quite a bit, and Bill from Mastodon would be there all the time because that was Kevo's home turf. And whether it was Butter Slacks or Lethargy or whatever bands he was in, we would do some shows here and there. But a lot of people wouldn't be like, hey, let's just go drive 10 hours for a show.
Yeah. No,
And
totally.
we were just
It,
kind of up for it.
it was actually very cool to have played with Lethargy just that one time, really, because like that's a band that's kind of like, based on the success of Mastodon and, Bill and Braun, their profile in the music world. Lethargy has become a bit of a
kind of like a legendary band. So it's really cool to have been able to play with them and see them perform live. And, it's quite mind blowing musicians in that band, really.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of times you don't give things, kind of the credence that it deserves, in the beginning, right? But you kind of look back and go like, oh, that was, that guy. Like, I don't know if you remember that band Polyglot
Yeah,
from
totally.
Maine. Well,
Yep.
that's Ian McFarland, who
Yeah.
did, the hardcore documentaries. He was in Blood for Blood and stuff. So it was like, oh, that was just some kid that was coming to Otis shows.
Yeah,
It was
totally.
really enthusiastic, and you're like, oh, okay, he's doing really well for himself.
Well, I mean, also remember Loga, from Maine, right? Of course, Aaron Harris played in Loga, and I think he was still in high school when we met that dude. Like
They
we
were
played
little
up in,
kids, yeah.
they were kids, they were little kids. Like we played in Old Town, Maine at that Mr. Heavy's like spot,
Yeah, yeah.
and this band was playing of like high school kids. It was like, oh, they were great. They're like this Melvin's like helmet kind of thing. And we just became friends with those guys. And Aaron Harris, who, has gone on to be in ISIS for many years. And now he's got a successful composing career, and he does
Yeah,
works in really high profile films now.
yeah. So does
Yeah.
John Swihart, who was in Decon, and he was also in that band Grip that recorded, or not recorded, but rehearsed across the street from you guys
Yeah.
when you lived on Hooker Street there.
Oh yeah. That
Um,
was, yeah. Oh yeah. That's right. Yeah. That's right. I forgot
yeah,
all about
he's doing all kinds of big time music, film music, music for TV, etc.
Yeah,
But
everyone's successful except for me and you, man. It seems.
well, it's weird. I got to a certain point, and it's like you feel like you're kind of beating your head against the wall, and you have opportunities, and they fall through, or like, I don't know. It's weird. It's hard to get that excitement going. So that's the beautiful thing about the project that I just put out, and this one is, it's like low risk. It's all fun. It's all for the music. Like, I'm not depending on any of this stuff for, you know, my well-being or my finances or anything like that. And I think when you're, chasing the dream, uh it's a weird mix, that the creativity and, hey, how am I going to make a life of this?
Yeah, dude, 100%. Because like I'm not saying that I've ever been successful
Oh,
financially in
you're
any of this stuff.
definitely successful. Tombs is a very successful band, but you don't measure that success
No,
on
but
in financial terms.
no, but like the point I was trying to make though, and this is like like when we were on like Metal Blade records, in the back of my mind, there is this whole idea about the business side of things too, that were running diametrically opposite to my creativity, I think, during that period. And because part of me is like, all right, now we're in this record label, there's like the Black Dahlia Murder, like Behemoth, Cannibal Corpse, like all these big players in extreme music were, we're in the same realm as them, at least on paper. And in my mind, I'm like, fuck, man, should we do anything different? Should we try to like, make our music something that, would be more palatable to some, kid on TikTok or something like that. Um, it was like, obviously I didn't obviously I threw those ideas out in the garbage because, that's not, I would feel very uncomfortable having done that. But there's always that idea of like, once it becomes more of like a business, once it becomes like people are relying on you to sell product to, there's like a bottom line associated with it. These thoughts creep into your mind, and it's like, it's kind of like the, detrimental to your creativity. That's why a lot of these bands, like, they're great bands, but sometimes they make the same record over and over again because this one sold the last time. We were able to get this much sound scan or this much like streams on all the channels. So we're
Yeah.
not going to stray too far away from that, and I've never wanted to live that life. I always wanted to like push things and have new stuff come out, that's different, and it's like, yeah, it's just like a weird, I don't think like creative outlets and finance mix ever really,
Well, it's it's an interesting dance. I mean, when Otis had the most, heat, if you want to call it that, there would be like a lunch with, hey, this is the guy. I don't know if you remember, we had lunch with this guy from some company, and he was managing Fishbone and Robbie
Yeah.
Robertson and all these people, and I'm like, so why are we here? And I I was kind of a dick. We were always kind of dicks to people, like kind of put them on their back feet a little bit during the conversation. But he's like, well, there's really nothing I can do, but when things get to a point, if you need a manager. And it's like, so it's almost like today with like the kind of influencer mentality. It's like, if you can make yourself famous, we can make you famous, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah,
And
totally.
there were a lot of people, when we were being booked by Premiere and opening for the Ramones and, doing some other things, that people were like, well, I'm at the ready if things go well. And it's like, well, can't you help us get things to go well? Or you just, they just want to be there with the fishing net. They don't want to do the fishing. They want to be the guy on the boat that's like holding the net, and get their piece of it.
That was like a very interesting year, I thought. Like looking back, we both touched on the fact that it felt like the band existed way longer than it did, but like it was like a quick, we had like a year of getting ready, of kind of like writing, not really being a band, like having different, members and kind of coming to an actual lineup. And then we had like a 2-year period of releasing 2 records and doing all this touring, touring Europe with Fetus and that whole thing, on a
Yeah.
nightliner was fun and all that. And then, but yeah, it's like, it was the what, early 90s at that point still, 93, 94, 95.
Yeah, it was 96 by the time we were in Europe.
Okay, so in 94, 95, 96.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So that was like kind of the tail end of like that explosion of early 90s alternative music becoming marketable, you know what I mean?
Well, if you remember, Bark Market was on that tour, and Dave Sardi had, even then, a pretty successful engineering career.
Yes.
And, he always made fun of us for being on the tour bus because he was still in a van.
Yeah.
And then, like, he spent one night on the bus when he was really drunk, and he's like, I want to see what bus life is like. And he's like, you guys suck, like he was just always kind of digging at us that, like, we, maybe we skipped a step or whatever. But like, that's how you get on the tours. Like that's the thing that people don't even realize is, our European deal, the money that came with tour support is what paid for that bus, and that's the reason why Fetus had us on the tour in the first place.
Yeah,
The
totally.
opening band helps pay for the tour.
Yeah, and like we load, instead of having a crew, they had us to load the equipment, if you remember. I don't know if you remember all that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Well, it was, there was a lot of sharing gear, so it was like, well, you guys do, the first line check, so it makes sense that you load stuff in or whatever.
Yeah, I
I
like
was
that
just happy
mentality.
to be there, but you'd run into people that had been in the business longer, like Rock, the drummer of
Rock
Bark
Sutton.
Market.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, no, Rock Sutton was in Fetus. Wasn't there
Oh,
another,
right. Right. Yeah.
the drummer was named Rock also? Like, what are the odds of 2 guys named Rock and then the same tour? I think I'll have to look it up. Apologies to him if I'm getting his name wrong. But I was walking with him in Germany one time, and I'm like, oh, there's your group. And I'm like, hey. And he's like, no, no, no. And I'm like, oh, I get it. Like, you're out here trying to get some alone time. You don't want to be with all your people. And I was just thinking, like, hey, it's fun. We're all here. He's like, no. You know, he had lived it longer. He had experienced it, you know.
But you know, even Bark Market at that point, they were like on American Records, I think.
Yeah,
And so they were on like they had some heat behind them too. You
yeah.
know, so they were like I think they'd even been on a long tour before that European tour we did together. Like they'd been like on some big, you know, tour in the States or something and went directly to Europe. So
They went to Japan that year too, I think.
yeah, yeah. So it was just like such an interesting period of for like it really did. There really was a sense that like you can be playing in front of 5 people one night, and then 3 months later you could be in front of like 5,000 people. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If
Well,
you were lucky.
there was one night, I don't know if you remember, I like got into a bit of an argument with Jim Thurwell, and I was trying to talk to him about reality, and he's like, "You've got your reality, I've got mine." And I'm like, "Well, this guy clearly has crossed over into rock stardom because he's got his own reality, you know." And it was after that tour that he got clean, you know.
Yeah, yeah. That was actually you know, not to like, you know, cast dirt here, but I think that was kind of the end of the line for him with for that because yeah, that tour, that band was like from day one to the end, you can see the crumbling of the whole thing. You know what I'm trying to say?
Well, William Tucker, who was in Ministry and
Yeah,
Pigface and playing with Fetus, he killed himself a few years after that tour, you know.
yeah. I remember reading about that and being like really bummed out because he didn't even finish that tour, if you remember.
No, he left. He had to, not to get into his whole thing, but he had a lot of pain and he had to get some medical attention, you know.
Yeah. And he
But
was one of the guys that I thought I actually spoke to him quite a bit on when the part. I mean, he was there for a few weeks, but and you
oh,
know,
he
he was
was
like,
great.
yeah, real nice guy, like quiet, you know. He was like sober on that tour too. So he was
Ah, not
really
entirely.
not
Not
entirely though, right?
entirely, yeah. Not
But
entirely, but like Dave Sardi used to give him side eyes because he'd come walking through and he's got his pancake makeup on and stuff, and Dave would look at him like, "What the fuck are you doing?" But like that's the show, right?
yeah, totally.
It's like the Dick Clark thing, like if you want to look like the crowd, then you're gonna be in the crowd, you know.
It's true. Yeah. But yeah, that was just like a, you know, we obviously whatever quality characteristic that was needed to go from playing in basements and small clubs to like, you know, rock stardom in the early 90s was missing in Otis. So,
Yeah,
you know what I'm saying? And like, but nonetheless, it was just interesting to see how the industry responded back then to bands that seemed to be not losers and have a little bit together and have a little bit of some kind of following, even if it was just a regional following. And how you touched on it earlier about all these, I'm going to say probably relatively low level managers and booking agents and, you know, whatever attorneys they found us, but without ever really committing to anything and just keeping, okay, if you guys need something, we're here for you, man.
yeah. Yeah, they just want to keep tabs on you. It's like some sports organizations can just put people on a list, saying, "Hey, we're negotiating with this person, so you can't." Like
Yeah,
they
no,
just want to
just
be. That's why everyone search for somebody in their teens. That's the ideal model for. It's like the Greg Brady thing. Like you fit the suit. You know what I mean? Like you're too dumb to understand the contracts and you don't understand how publishing works, and even if you did, it's not going to help you. I mean, this most recent TV thing that I did with Roman Letters, I was extremely grateful and happy to do it, but at the same time I didn't even read the contract because I know it's like you're going to get what you're going to get. And if you don't take the deal, then somebody else will. So do you want to be a part of it or not? And because I don't have any stake in it really, I was just happy to do it for whatever they're willing to give.
Yeah. Now, did you the stuff that did you record all that stuff with Benny, the Roman letter stuff?
No, that was with Mike from Antler, Mike Quinn.
Oh, okay.
So it was at the same studio because I was living over there on the property of Mad Oak, and it was nice and convenient. And I had been in a band with Mike, and I honestly chose him for his, kind disposition. I wanted somebody that I knew well enough that, they'd be patient with me and just kind of put up with my shit. And then Andrew Schneider, who you of course know from Slug Hog and Barbaro and all of his recording genius, he picked it up from there and mixed it and mastered it at his place out in upstate New York.
Oh, that's right. He lives upstate New York now.
Well, he's kind of both. The studio itself is in upstate, but I think he's in Brooklyn some of the time and he's upstate some of the time.
Yeah, I ran into his wife at this Eugene Robinson thing a couple of years ago, and she was telling me about where they live, and it's not too far from where I grew up, actually.
Yeah, it's beautiful up there. I mean, we used to, when we were driving through, we would stop by at your parents' place or
Yeah.
my mom's place in New Jersey and get a home cooked meal. I always tell the people the story of like your mom was like that scene in Goodfellas. Like we show up at 1, 2 in the morning and she'd pull out all these like trays of baked pasta and stuff and cook it out. It's like, oh, you don't have to do this. She's like, no, no, no. But yeah, it was great.
Yeah, my parents have been hosts to a lot of scumbags, like sleeping on the floor, on the couch, and everything in their house over the years. That's for sure.
Absolutely. I think we went to my grandmother's place in Nashville. We got pulled over by the police on the way there because they're like, "What the hell are you doing in the area?"
Oh, I
And
remember that. Yeah.
Kev was like, "I think I'm gonna cry because like my grandma's got like a whole spread of food for everybody and." You're living pretty lean. I mean, there was, people are always like, oh, you guys were so thin then. And it's like, yeah, we couldn't afford to eat, like we would do like a whole day, with nothing and then play a show and then get a few bucks, fill up the gas tank and then eat one meal at like 2 a.m. or whatever. And then that would hold you through the next day.
Probably like the most large living we did was on the European tour, but in the States, the dates with the Ramones, because I remember, I forgot what, maybe Norfolk, Virginia, we played with them. And that was when they couldn't escape us because the backstage area was like just this one big room. So
Yeah.
Everyone had to kind of deal with each other and be in the same room with the opening band, and their manager, the tour manager, was like, you guys, if you want to eat that food over there, we were going to throw it out. You know what I mean? So yeah, we were going to throw it out anyway. But if you guys want
leftovers.
Yeah, take it. So it was like, so we like totally feasted on like whatever catering they had that day.
Yeah, Joey sat down. We've got that photo. Joey sat down and actually talked with us that day, which was really nice. But
yeah,
we didn't really. CJ was great. I've been trying to connect with him on Instagram just to say hello, but I don't know if he accepts messages. But he would watch from the side of the stage. He was really supportive. He's like, hey, the guys are asking if you're gonna be the next Buzzpen, the Buzzpen band, because that was like big on MTV at the time or whatever.
Oh yeah.
I don't think we're gonna be a buzz band, Ben, but
no. CJ and Marky were the two guys that actually, I remember Marky would watch us too play as well. And Marky was like one of the guys who would talk to us and everything,
Yeah, Johnny I said hello to, and he just stared at me until I stopped looking at him. It was
Johnny Ramone.
Uncomfortable.
Johnny Ramone was known as being an asshole to a lot of people, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, I mean Joey asked to use our room in New York. I don't know if you remember that. He's like, "Can I use your room?" He just wanted his own space away from those guys.
Yeah,
but
I remember our dressing room ended up just being the hallway, like outside of.
There was a small room in it. I don't know if you remember this. This is like classic us because we never expected anything or had high expectations about what we deserve, so we never put in a rider with anyone for any food or drink. So we show up into our room, and there's one of those like metal, tubs that's supposed to be full of ice and drinks, and it just has one Sprite can floating in water from like the night before or whatever, and maybe like a bag of Ruffles. And I was like, hey, we're living the high life now.
But not for nothing, the premiere should have been like, we need a rider from you guys so you guys don't starve when you're out there on tour. You
Eh,
know?
Again, they were just, they were booking U2 and Van Halen and a bunch of other big bands, so they didn't give a shit about us. Like that New York show, we're like, oh, is the big guy gonna show up? Like, I don't know if you remember this, but we had that meeting with the top guy, and he's like a legendary guy in the business. I can't remember his name. And he was telling us all these stories about the Beatles and Jimi Hendrix and all the things that he's booked over his career, and he has this like cleaning woman come in and empty his ashtray in the middle of the meeting. He's just smoking cigars. And I'm like, is that a power move where like he pushes a button and it's like in the middle of the meeting, so he seems important? Somebody comes in and takes the ashtray and just dumps it into the trash can that's right next to him. I was like, wow, that's wild.
Yeah, that's pretty surreal to think about. Like that's I do remember that, that thing. And that was the day of the show with the Ramones in New York. I remember we were there and
Yeah.
we went to their
Yeah.
office and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I'm like, do you think he's gonna come? And she's like, probably not. And I'm like, yeah, I doubt it too, man. I don't think he'd show up to support the Ramones, let alone us.
Oh yeah, and the Ramones were booked by Premiere. That's how
Yeah,
the whole
that's
thing
how we
came
got
together.
connected to it. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that was
Yeah,
pretty
man.
wild, man. And then just like it was kind of like a trip watching, like being in New York and playing with the Ramones too, which was like, I remember being like a little kid. They were like the Ramones for me personally were the first like punk band that I ever listened to.
Well,
And
they were one of the first punk bands.
yeah, but I
They
mean,
were
like,
they were heavily influenced by the Clash by their own account of it, but you know, watching Rock and Roll High School, like the movie and all that stuff, like I was down.
yeah, so like years later to be actually sharing the stage with those guys was pretty crazy. And so once again, just about Johnny, I actually had a conversation with him on that tour at the New York show.
Oh yeah.
Because it was one of those deals, like I said, unlike other cities, even in nice venues like that, the backstages at New York clubs, like big venues like that, it's also small. You don't have, it's not like you're in like a different market where the backstages are nicer. The New York ones are always cramped and whatever. So Johnny couldn't get away from anybody. He was there. I talked to him briefly, and I wouldn't say we had a conversation, but he like talked like at me for like maybe 8 minutes with
Yeah,
like no eye contact or anything like that.
he was a weird dude. Marky was a weird guy too. I don't know if you remember this story, but Ethan had stowed away with us on that trip,
Oh,
and
right.
he walks up. He's like, "I need to get Marky's autograph," and he's drunk. And he comes up. He's got one square of toilet paper, and he hands it to him with a pen. And like, you can't write on toilet paper, so Marky's like trying to do the right thing and give this kid an autograph. And I was just like, "Oh wow, I can't believe this is happening right now. Like, we shouldn't have brought this guy back." Rest in
You know,
peace.
rest in peace, Ethan, man. That was like a hard one to swallow, man, when he passed.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
And at
Yeah.
that point, I hadn't seen him in years, actually. You know what I mean?
I ran into him. I had a thing before I moved to Switzerland. I had this dinner in Brookline, and I ended up at the bar that he was bartending, and had a nice conversation with him. So I'm kind of happy. That was like in 2011. So I'm happy that we made that connection.
Yeah, it's real. It was real. His passing came in a period in my life where a lot of people were passing away, and
Yeah.
a lot of people I was really close to died like around the time I heard about his passing, and it was just another brick of like a whole load that I was carrying on my shoulders around that for like the last couple of years. So yeah, it was just pretty brutal, really.
Yeah, I mean, I've been pretty lucky. I mean, part of it is, I don't get extremely close to anybody, so it doesn't yeah, that helps cushion the blow a little bit. But no matter how cold-hearted I can be, it's always tough, when I get that news.
Yeah, it's funny because like I was there's the inside of the first Otis record. There's
Yeah.
the photograph of Ethan in there holding a gun to my head, basically.
Yeah, I remember being in the kitchen for that.
Yeah, and I was like, damn, man, that dude's like, that young guy is like gone now. It's pretty intense.
Yeah, he was just a kid, man. He was just a kid too soon. But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. It's weird, those big experiences end up not being as big as you thought they were going to be. Like we played Summerfest, and that's like, the biggest festival in the US. It's like 11 days, tons of big bands in that year. There was like Pearl Jam and Hootie and the Blowfish, and like the height of that kind of mid 90s, popular bands were playing. And we were opening for Goo Goo Dolls, but we played like at, I don't know, 1 p.m. or something.
Yeah.
And nobody's there. And all like, PS, you need to move out of the dressing room like immediately. So you can't even be backstage for like the bands in the middle of the day, let alone the end of the day when the Goo Goo Dolls are there. So it's like, I'm part of it. Like I'm listed as part of this, but I'm not really part of it. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, totally, man. It's like playing festivals like that. It's always kind of like a trip, but it's more of like it's a line item on in your bio or something. You know what I mean? It's like when you're trying to like do bigger things, they list that, and then okay, what festivals you play? Oh, Summerfest, we played this, we played that. It's like, yeah, we did, but we were there. Like we performed a set
we
at
were
that
physically
event.
there.
Yeah, we performed, yes, but whether or not we were part of that, it's debatable.
We met that band Die Cheerleader at that show, and we already had a tour booked with them. I don't
That's
think
right.
we said more than a word with them at all. Like we snuck into the Filter show. Like we talked our way into backstage for the Filter show that they
Yes.
were opening. And we're like, oh, we're opening for this band next month. They're like, I don't understand what you're talking about, but just go ahead, And
there was that one dude, though. There was that one guy that was in Filter that was friends with the guys. I ended up, that guy.
He showed up, that Frank, the bass player, showed up in Cleveland because they're from that area.
Yes. Yeah.
He showed up at the grog shop.
Right. Yeah, that guy ended up, I ended up getting to know that guy because he was friends with the dudes in that band Keel Hall that Anodyne would play with, and Tombs would also play with quite a bit. And he was part of that Cleveland circle of people. There's all those bands from Cleveland. And that guy would be like a recurring character over the last 20 years or so,
No shit.
Yeah,
it was weird. He was all excited that I recognized him, but I was like, well, I just saw you at Summerfest, and I know that you have a connection with this band, blah, blah, blah. So it's not like, I picked you out of a lineup, but I'm like, hey, you're in Filter. He's like, I am, but
one of the best power moves too, like one of the funnier moves was our connection with Letters to Cleo.
Oh, that was the best. Yeah.
We
would just stalk them like wherever they were. Like we were in Minneapolis and we just show up and like they give us food and stuff to get rid of us,
That was the move though. Cause like I remember on several occasions they would be on tour at the same time we were on tour, but they would be playing these like, like First Avenue venues where it's like,
we were in 7th Street Entry.
Yeah, we would be in the 7th Street Entry. They would be playing the room that holds like 1,500 people. And we would be in the room that holds 200 people with actually 15 people there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then
Michael
it was like
Epstein is like, hey, there's a guy with a Sam Black Church shirt. And Kay's like, that's just one of the Otis guys.
like, they would invite us backstage, and right away I would like just invade the food area. You know what I mean?
Oh,
and take stuff, put it in my pocket, like bread and things like that, and for later, you know what I mean?
Dude, she gave me a whole half-gallon of orange juice one time,
Yeah.
like whatever we could get, But we did play that July 4th show with them in Washington, D.C., which was pretty cool. Like there
Oh
weren't a
yeah.
ton of people there, but it was the outdoor thing, and um, you know, they were nice. There was like a few other bit like Parade of Losers and some other bands were on that bill, but we showed up so early. This guy came. We're there like 4 in the morning or whatever, like just in the field. And this guy's like, "All right, I'm gonna need you to." He thought we were part of the crew putting the stage together, and it's like, "I'm not doing anything. I'm playing." He's like, "What the fuck are you doing here already?" It's like we don't plan our tours well. I don't know what to tell you.
Yeah, it was like we would just go to the venues. We had nowhere else to go, man. It was like it was funny. Like, we would do I'm not sure if we played like the night before or something, but it was
We
like,
did.
well,
We played the night before, and we were like, we don't want to unload the van. We're gonna be heading down there anyway, so let's just leave from the previous night's gig in Boston and just go.
oh yeah,
You
that's
know?
right. Yeah, yeah. That's like, yeah. It was like, wow, out of laziness for not unloading the van. Instead of unloading the van and sleeping wherever we lived, we drove like 7 hours or something like that. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
to go
Well,
to.
the one show that's on YouTube, the Khyber Pass show, which is actually a really good show if you check it out. At the end of it, people are like, "Play one more," and we're like, "No, got to drive to Maine." And they're like, "Maine? Like you're not even gonna spend the night in Philadelphia?" It's like, "No, we're gonna immediately drive to Maine and get there whenever we get there, regardless of what time the show is."
And go sit outside the club at like 8 o'clock in the morning. Well, that night, probably.
Yeah, I mean, it just shows you how much we had going on. Like we put everything into it.
Yeah, there
But
really wasn't much going on in my life really at the time of doing that band, man. Because it's like, if I remember correctly, speaking of Michael, well, I'm not going to name any names, but attorneys, there was that Sweetheart publishing deal that we got, which allowed us to kind of live for like a few months or whatever.
yeah, I don't know if it was as much of a sweetheart deal. Like oftentimes those things were like, the real money is going to be in like the next record or another record down, and we never ended up like making those records.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was being ironic by saying Sweetheart deal because it was basically like, to make a long story short, it's like you give us everything and we give you like $20. That was kind of like really what it came. But we were so like, we were really at the point where, because that was the second time that offer had come to us. The first time we were like, fuck this, man. This is like,
Yeah.
this isn't gonna work. We're gonna sell 1 million albums, man, like on our next record. So let's hold off and see if something better comes along. But then a year later, we're all like destitute, and it's just like, huh, can we
Yeah, but you never know what's going on behind the scenes, because like I'd be in the office and like, "Hey, what's this?" And it's like, "Oh, that's a snowboard ski video that you guys are in," or "This is from a video game compilation." And I'm like, "I don't remember getting any money for this, or like, anybody mentioning it." So like, shit would just get licensed to different things and it would never equate to anything.
yeah. Yeah, such a fucking weird world, man. You know what I mean? When especially back then, because like once again, it's like now things are way different. I mean, it's like, anyone doing like any kind of like real like business in the world of music or films or video games are like already known players in that world. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And back then, it's like you could just be like a bunch of guys in a band, and like maybe something opportunity like that would come, and that would be really cool. But like none of us knew what the hell we were doing. We didn't know what was available, like what opportunities there were, what opportunities didn't exist for us. We all had our own ideas about like what the future could possibly be and stuff like that.
Well, everybody seemed to be in the business somehow. So, like in that era, like you were putting out a zine, you were a publicist, you were a photographer, you were a manager, you had your own label. It seemed like everybody was doing something. related to the music business. And if, maybe they had a record store job, everybody was working at, Newberry or Tower and stuff like that. But, I was just aspiring, stupidly to be like these people where they had like a quote unquote full-time job in music, but, they were just, scraping by and barely holding it together. It was more
Yeah.
like the appearance that, they worked in the industry for the most part. And even if you did like that, that Jaded Salinger's record I did with Elgin James, Shred from BCN put that out. And at the time, he was the rep for Columbia. And we're like, so what do the people at Columbia think? And he's like, well, I don't really like to, use my connections. It's like, that's specifically what we're doing here, right? Like,
Yeah.
that's why we're talking to you in the first place, is the connection. So let's try and use them. But, everybody had their different idea of how to run their business, I guess.
Is Shred still active at all, doing anything with music?
I don't know. I'm not good. I left Facebook years ago, and a lot of the people that like him, I kind of lost track of when I left Facebook.
So I didn't, it's funny, like, we're recording this like basically the day after the Begotten Suns thing went up. And I had no idea that you were on Instagram, otherwise I would have tagged you in that post.
No, that's all right. I try and keep a low profile. I don't put my actual name on there. I promote my art very little. It's just kind of, I have a very much like a take it or leave it kind of approach to anything I'm doing. I'm happy to sink my money into things because, whether it's art or music or whatever, you have a vision like, hey, this thing needs to be produced that I have in my mind. And if you have the wherewithal, you might as well put your energy into doing it. And again, like we said, if you have, kind of an ulterior motive for it, it's probably going to affect the output, like I don't make like $1,000 piece of art, thinking I'm going to sell it for more because I know I'm not going to, but it
One of the,
exists nonetheless.
one of the things that I learned about from you when I stayed at your house that night after we recorded the drums was
Yeah,
I had
yeah.
no idea you did art, to be honest.
Well, that came about in Switzerland because I had stepped away from music for so long that I kind of had like a creative midlife crisis. So ultimately you'll find your way into doing whatever it is, right? So people are like, oh, I'd love to paint, and it's like, well, step one is do it. You know what I mean? So if you'd really love to do it, then just do it. And if you're focused on the outcome or whether it looks like the thing that you're trying to make, you're never going to get anywhere. Like how do you make one good painting, make 200 shitty paintings? And it's kind of the same thing with music or whatever else.
Also, like, I don't know if you're ready to talk about it now, but you've been talking to me about a book that you've been writing, or I don't know if you're
it,
completed
it's
it.
written, yeah.
And I imagine you probably would tell me like when that's going to be published or anything like that.
It's it's the same type of thing. For a while I was chasing, opportunities and trying to get different people to read it, and people as high up as like, the William Morris Endeavor people, got it. But you never know what people actually read, how much of it, how much they give a shit. So, and even if they do, what does it mean, in the end, right? So I don't know. I put a lot of time into it, and it's pretty sizable, but it's not something that, I really want to share from the perspective of me. It's kind of anonymous, and I've even talked to people about ghostwriting it for me. So I don't know. We'll see what happens with that. It's kind of, not that I have it in the bank, but like it's done. I wanted to do it and I did it. You know what I mean? And that's kind of more the point than anything, right? Is and I know you're goal oriented, so you have the goal, you achieve the goal, and then you have like a few moments of, whatever it is, not adulation, but maybe a self-satisfaction, and then immediately you need to produce something else to kind of recreate that feeling and keep the creative flow going in your life.
Yeah,
But
definitely, man. And that's why I'm happy to get this Begotten Suns thing out too, because it took a while to get it. I mean, actually, it didn't take a while. It was like very quickly the whole thing came together and the master and all that. So, but yeah, it's like always kind of chasing the dragon. You know what I mean with this stuff.
but it came quickly because of the preparedness, right? So you had done all of the things in your life and built up your engineering capabilities and your home studio setup. And so it's kind of like when people are like, hey, I need you to do this creative thing for me, but you did it so fast, why am I paying you so much money? And it's like, you're paying me so much money because of all the time that I put into it to be able to do it that fast, right?
Yeah.
So you've achieved, X number of studio sessions under your belt, and that's what your talent is what makes it come easy. I mean, I was really blown away by it. The early demos were great, but the final product, I listened to it on headphones the last few days and prep for this, and I'm really blown away by it.
Yeah, I hadn't listened to it for a while, because like how it is. It's like I'm like disgusted by anything that I do, like immediately after after I'm done with it. Like I can't, like I'll listen to it like when we get the mixes done. I'll be like, all right, good. I can't listen to this anymore. Then when Benny sent over the masters, I actually, obviously I had to listen to it again, and there's a lot of distance between when we recorded finished the session and the mixes, and then the master was like a couple months later. So I'd kind of lost track of what the material was all about. And I was like, huh, yeah, it's actually pretty good. I feel pretty good about all this stuff. And, once again, reviewing the masters, I'd listened to it with just through monitors and then, through a headset. And with the headset on, I was like, oh, there's like a lot of cool details in here that I almost forgot we did.
Well, I was lucky enough to, be even more external to it, in that like I didn't really know how to play it or really know the material when I did it. So
Yeah.
I've kind of felt like a witness or an audience member the whole time. So I kind of listen to it as if I'm not involved, which is the best way from my perspective to really be honest with yourself about how good it is.
Yeah, and the funny thing about it was like when we showed up at Mad Oak to do this drum session, you were like not even sure if you were going to play drums anymore. You know what I mean? I was like, your whole thing was like, this might be the last time I play drums ever, and I'm like, man, I hope not.
Well, I mean, it's just based on history. Like the Roman letters sessions, I played drums in August of last year, right?
Yeah.
So that was the 8/22. So I hadn't played drums at all, let alone recording, since 2011, and not even a lot even then. And I hadn't recorded since 2006. So, it was a long stretch of time between when I made the last Antler record and when I made Roman Letters and now the Begotten Suns. So, it kind of, I still kind of feel that way, that those things may be the last thing I do. But obviously, if you hit me up and say, hey, I've got X number of more songs, let's go in and do it, then I'd be happy to do it. And by the same token, if I come up with, another 4 or 5 songs for Roman Letters, I'll do that as well. And, the beauty for either is that they're, kind of scalable because it's not really a conventional band.
Yeah, definitely. That's what's nice about it too. It's like, because I mean, with Tombs, there's expectations and there's like schedules and shows and we got to deliver things on certain days and stuff like that. And to have something that's purely a creative outlet, you know, that's like you just kind of throw it out there into the universe, and it's like take it or leave it, you know, it's here it is.
Yeah.
It's like it makes it more fun and way more satisfying in some ways, you know, because it's like you can try stuff that I can try things that I, you know, have been wanting to try, but I haven't had an opportunity to do that, or it didn't feel appropriate in other settings to try those things. But there's like a brand new clean sheet of paper with literally no eyes on it, and no one's, you know, really, oh, this sounds cool, whatever. They're open to things or not open to things, and it doesn't even matter because it's primarily just for me and you.
Yeah. No, that's the best thing, and those are the things that actually become, you know, the timeless you know, components of our, you know, our structure of art and music, etc., you know. And I very much like the kind of drop it and run and not really be around for it. I've done a lot of that with art, you know, you just abandon it and somebody picks it up and you're not there for when they pick it up, and I don't need to see their reaction or their interface with it. That really has nothing to do with me. Like I've already done my part, you know what I mean? And it's the same kind of thing with this.
Yeah. So definitely let me know what's going on with if the book gets published or something. I'd like to talk to you about all that stuff too, man, you know.
I will. It's hard because I have a regular, you know, day job life, and, you know, I can't really, you know, talk about a lot of the stuff in the book without fear of, you know, losing jobs and things of that nature. But you know, which is one of the reasons why I want to kind of put it out anonymously. You know, I always promised myself I'd never do a podcast because I'm always too honest and I don't really I don't really give a shit and I provide too much information, but you know, this I kind of have to keep a little close to the vest, you know.
Right on. Gotcha about that. No problem. But yeah, dude, I'll see you in a few weeks, man. I'll be up in Providence and we'll hang out if you're
I
around,
hope
that is.
I hope to be there. I will make every effort to come to that show and film it. You know, it's a nice venue. It's right down the street from me, and always happy to see you play because you know you always bring it, and it's nice to be in the audience and kind of get their perspective of it, you know.
Well, thanks a lot, man. I appreciate you. And I'll let you, we'll stay in touch about the thing in Providence, man. All
I
right.
appreciate you, and thanks for this, and congratulations on the Begotten Suns. I really am thankful to have been part of it, and you know it came out really great.
Right on, man. Take care. Have a good day.
All right, take care, man.